welcome back to our channel. Don't spend that dime. A rare version could be worth a fortune. Like and subscribe to find out what to check. In 1968, the United States Mint was balancing tradition and transition. It was only a few years after silver had been removed from circulating dimes, and by now, the nation was growing accustomed to the newer copper-nickel-clad composition. The Roosevelt dime, still carrying the enduring image of the late president, remained unchanged in appearance but no longer carried the intrinsic value of silver it once had. It was a practical decision, prompted by rising silver prices and economic strain, but not without consequence. Coins felt lighter, sounded different, and carried less nostalgia. Still, millions were produced, and life moved on. Amid this efficiency, however, a quiet imperfection was born, one that would not make headlines but would slowly, over time, redefine the legacy of a single year's coinage. The 1968 Roosevelt dime was struck in massive numbers, over 480 million from the Denver Mint alone, plus an additional supply from the San Francisco and Philadelphia mints. Yet within that volume, a very small handful of dimes were different, the result of a mechanical misstep in the hubbing process. And while most would pass through hands unnoticed, one of them would come to light not through accident, but because someone was searching for it, without even knowing what they were looking for. Eleanor Rhodes, a retired postal clerk in Virginia, had taken up coin collecting as a quiet pursuit. She wasn't chasing wealth or fame, she simply enjoyed patterns, details, and the small discoveries that numismatics offered. Her strategy was straightforward: examine every coin she received as change and occasionally purchase unsearched rolls from estate sales and old bank holdings. It was in the spring of 2006 when she acquired an old cigar box filled with dimes from the late 1960s. The coins were mostly tarnished, many showing years of wear. She almost dismissed the 1968 ones entirely, they seemed too common, too ordinary. But something told her to examine them more closely. One dime stood out, not because of its shine, but because something felt off. At first, she thought the coin had taken a hard hit or been pressed awkwardly. But under her magnifying glass, she noticed something peculiar in the lettering. The word "Liberty" showed ghost-like shadows, faint but persistent, as if the die had shifted ever so slightly. The motto, "In God We Trust," exhibited a strange echo in its lettering. She turned the coin over. The torch, olive branch, and oak branch appeared doubled at the edges, particularly along the flames and tips of the leaves. Uncertain but intrigued, Eleanor sent the coin to a numismatic grading service. When the results came back, she was stunned. The coin had been verified as a genuine doubled die, a rare and striking example from 1968. It was graded MS-66, a near-perfect specimen with full detail and very minimal contact marks. And more importantly, it was one of only a few ever verified with such clear doubling on both sides. Word spread slowly, as these discoveries often do. Specialists began combing through their own 1968 Roosevelt dimes. Most found nothing, but a few others surfaced, each showing slight variations in doubling, some on the obverse, some on the reverse. The strongest examples, like Eleanor's, remained incredibly scarce. Unlike earlier double die varieties, such as the famed 1969 S Lincoln cent, the 1968 Roosevelt dime had not been widely studied. This oversight now gave it a mystique few had anticipated. Auction interest grew in the early 2010s. The first known MS-67 example to hit the market sold for $26,000, a surprising result for a clad coin of the modern era. But collectors knew that rarity, not composition, was the defining value in numismatics. And the rarity here was undeniable. A dime with minor wear might fetch a few hundred, but the high-grade, sharply struck examples, the ones that fully captured the die anomaly, became the new holy grail for Roosevelt dime collectors. Then came an unexpected turn. In 2019, a Michigan-based dealer acquired a 1968 dime in a batch of ungraded coins from a retired bank employee's collection. The coin had remained untouched since it was pulled from circulation in the early 1970s and tucked away out of nothing more than curiosity. When submitted for grading, the results shocked even the dealer. The coin was not only a double die but also struck on a transitional silver planchet, something thought impossible given the mint's strict composition changeover in 1965. The weight confirmed it. It was a 90% silver planchet left over, somehow making its way into a 1968 clad production year. The error, already rare on its own, became an absolute anomaly in this new context. A double-die 1968 Roosevelt dime, struck on a leftover silver planchet, in near-mint condition. The coin sold in a private transaction for $128,000 just months later, setting a new benchmark not only for the variety but for modern Roosevelt dimes overall. It caused experts to re-examine the records and mint processes of the late 1960s with fresh urgency. Collectors who had long ignored the Roosevelt series began reconsidering. The 1968 double-die dime became a symbol of hidden value, proof that even in a decade of widespread coin production, some secrets had managed to stay buried. And as more people scoured their change jars and inherited boxes, the story of Eleanor's discovery became a kind of legend among hobbyists. It wasn't just about money, it was about what could be found in the most familiar places. To this day, the number of confirmed 1968 double-die Roosevelt dimes remains extremely low. Most known examples are held by private collectors or dealers who refuse to part with them. The U.S. Mint has never publicly acknowledged the error, and no official documentation explains how it occurred. But it did. And every so often, one of these coins finds its way to the surface, offering a glimpse into the complex, imperfect, and oddly beautiful world of American coinage. Now, the value of a verified 1968 U.S. one-dime coin featuring strong double-die characteristics, especially in mint state, with high-grade red and white luster, can range from $64,000 to $132,000. It's a coin that slipped quietly into the world with an error no one expected and became a prize that collectors now chase with relentless precision. A single dime, transformed by accident and preserved by chance, remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of its time. In 1975, the United States Mint prepared for one of the most symbolic years in American numismatic history. The following year, 1976, would mark the nation's bicentennial, and preparations were already underway to honor 2 centuries of independence with special coinage. But in the quiet before that storm of patriotic redesigns, 1975 itself seemed like an ordinary year. The Roosevelt dime, still bearing the resolute image of the late president, rolled off presses in massive quantities. Most were perfectly ordinary, efficient, mass-produced pieces of commerce that would move swiftly through hands, pockets, and cash registers. But not all. Among the millions of dimes struck that year, a few bore a flaw that would go unnoticed for years. It was not a glaring mistake. There was no missing design element, no off-center strike, no blank planchet. It was, instead, the kind of error that lives in shadows and fine lines, a subtle doubling that altered the very foundation of the design. This doubling didn't shout, it whispered. And it would take a particular kind of patience to hear it. Douglas Hadley, a high school history teacher from Pennsylvania, had a passion for coins that bordered on obsession. His weekends were often spent at flea markets, estate sales, and coin shows, not as a dealer but as a seeker. He didn't chase rarity for profit but for the stories hidden in metal. In the fall of 2008, he purchased a modest collection of dimes from a retired railroad conductor, an old cigar box with dozens of rolls spanning from 1965 to 1980. He catalogued them methodically, roll by roll, noting nothing unusual, until he got to a paper-wrapped roll marked 75 dimes. One coin in that roll stopped him cold. Under natural light, it shimmered like the others, but when he tilted it slightly, the motto, "In God We Trust," appeared to blur, almost shimmer, as though vibrating. He took it to his loupe and examined the obverse. There it was, clear doubling along the date, especially the P9 and the 7, and a shadow-like impression under Roosevelt's chin. The reverse was no less compelling. The flame atop the torch was split, not once but twice, with a distinct layering visible across the vertical lines. Unwilling to jump to conclusions, Douglas sent the coin to a grading service. Weeks later, the results returned, a certified double die, both obverse and reverse, with strong mechanical characteristics and minimal wear. The coin was graded MS-66. Only a handful of 1975 Roosevelt dimes had ever been found with such strong doubling, and this one ranked among the finest. Word traveled slowly but steadily. Collectors who had ignored the 1975 issue began taking a second look. While the Roosevelt dime had never attracted the same fervor as its Lincoln or Washington counterparts, this error breathed new life into the series. The double die from 1975 wasn't widespread, it was exceptionally rare. Some suggested that only a single die pair had produced them, likely early in the production cycle, before the mistake was noticed and corrected. Most examples that surfaced showed wear, suggesting they had circulated before collectors realized their significance. In 2012, another high-grade specimen surfaced at an estate auction in Illinois. The coin had remained in a plastic sleeve, tucked into the pages of a collector's notebook that hadn't been opened in decades. It showed similar doubling, but with a sharper strike and nearly full torch details. When it crossed the auction block, it fetched an astonishing $44,000, sending a ripple through the coin collecting community. Then came a twist. A collector in Arizona, specializing in transitional errors and anomalies, revealed that he had discovered a 1975 dime struck on a foreign planchet, specifically one intended for a 10 centavos coin minted in another country under U.S. contract. The weight was off, the edges slightly irregular, but most shockingly, the coin also featured partial doubling. The anomaly of a double die on an incorrect planchet created a hybrid that was unprecedented for the year. That coin, despite surface abrasions and imperfect luster, attracted widespread attention. Graded $58, it sold in a private transaction for $67,500, making it one of the highest-priced modern Roosevelt dimes ever sold at the time. Experts began re-examining the output of the mint that year, questioning whether overlooked transitional blanks had slipped into circulation or if a deeper error in die maintenance had occurred. Over the following years, only a small number of additional examples came to light, and most failed to match the sharp doubling of Douglas Hadley's discovery. His original coin was later regraded at MS-67 and offered through a major auction house, where it brought in $92,000, nearly tripling its estimated value from the early days. Its fame had grown not just from the doubling, but from the patience of the man who found it, and the curiosity that led him to question what others overlooked. The 1975 Roosevelt dime had once seemed like the definition of ordinary. It had no commemorative design, no silver content, and no attention-grabbing publicity from the mint. But in that silence, something remarkable had formed. A minting error that escaped detection, survived circulation, and became one of the most captivating stories of accidental rarity in modern American coinage. Today, collectors scour 1975 dime rolls with a different mindset. They understand that within the most familiar coins lie potential treasures. That errors don't always scream, they often whisper. That history isn't just about what's printed in books, but what's pressed into metal, year after year, sometimes imperfectly. A certified 1975 US 1 dime coin with strong double die characteristics, especially in uncirculated or mint state condition, now commands a market value between $50,000 and $118,000. Proof that even the smallest coin, when touched by the right mistake, can become a legendary find. In 1981, the rhythm of the U.S. Mint was confident and mechanical, the hum of progress drowning out the imperfections that sometimes snuck through its high-speed systems. It was the tail end of a decade marked by inflation, fuel crises, and political transition, yet coinage remained constant, a daily staple in the American pocket. The Roosevelt dime, struck in copper-nickel clad since the mid-60s, was among the most overlooked. It carried none of the dramatic flair of commemorative issues or the nostalgia of silver predecessors. Still, it moved through millions of transactions every day, its value unquestioned, its design familiar. That year, the minting volume was staggering. Over 900 million Roosevelt dimes were struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, more than enough to serve the country's needs for years. Machines ran with cold precision, producing perfectly shaped blanks, preparing dies, striking the iconic profile of Roosevelt, and delivering thousands of coins per minute. But within that sea of uniformity, something went wrong. Not in a way that would shut down production or cause alarm, nothing that urgent. But it was wrong enough to leave a permanent, almost invisible signature on a small number of coins. In the late 1990s, a coin enthusiast named Lewis Parker was sifting through a forgotten coin jar in his late uncle's garage in rural Ohio. The collection wasn't curated, just decades of loose change saved in an old mason jar. Parker had recently rekindled his interest in coin collecting after retirement, driven by a quiet curiosity more than expectation. He wasn't looking for anything specific. He just liked patterns, discrepancies, history in his hands. The jar offered mostly nickels, quarters, and pennies, worn from years of handling. He separated the dimes by decade and began a closer inspection, coin by coin. It was a 1981 dime that pulled him in, not for its shine, but for how the light played off the lettering. Liberty looked distorted when viewed at an angle. The spacing felt inconsistent. Roosevelt's eye appeared slightly doubled, like a motion blur frozen in metal. Parker examined it under magnification. The date showed a clear doubling on the 9 and the 1, not mechanical machine doubling, but a true double die, created during the hubbing process when the die was improperly impressed with the design more than once at slightly misaligned angles. Even the motto, "In God We Trust," had a faint echo along the lower edges of the letters. The reverse revealed doubling too, particularly in the rays of the torch and the surrounding leaves, where overlapping detail suggested a misalignment of the die's original impressions. That he sent the coin for grading with cautious optimism. When it came back, the verdict exceeded his hopes. It was a true double die, uncirculated, and sharply defined, graded MS-66 with full bands on the torch. Few such examples were known, and the grading service labeled it as one of the strongest of its kind for that year. Collectors had largely ignored 1981 Roosevelt dimes, assuming nothing spectacular ever came from them. But Parker's discovery challenged that belief. Word circulated slowly through collector forums and hobby publications. More people began examining their change, digging into old rolls from the early 80s. A few similar specimens emerged, some with doubling limited to the obverse, others with stronger features on the reverse. Most, however, lacked the clarity of Parker's find. In 2010, his coin was placed in a specialized error coin auction. To many, the Roosevelt series still felt pedestrian. But serious collectors of U.S. mint varieties knew how rare such double dies were in modern coinage, especially when confirmed on both sides. The final hammer price shocked many, $38,500, well beyond expectations. And it wasn't just the price that caught attention. It was the coin's story. Found not in a dealer's hoard or a vault, but in a dusty jar that had sat forgotten for years, the Roosevelt dime series began to draw new attention. Error coin collectors turned their sights to 1981, combing through unsearched bank rolls, estate sales, and old coin books. Few coins surfaced with doubling as strong as Parker's, but his discovery had opened a door that wouldn't close again. Then came a twist. A dealer in Wisconsin revealed a 1981 Roosevelt dime with an unusually heavy planchet. Testing revealed the coin had been struck on a blank intended for a foreign contract, possibly for a South American or Caribbean denomination. What made it extraordinary wasn't just the off-metal composition, but the fact that it too showed signs of doubling on the obverse lettering. Whether the double die had been used briefly on a different planchet or whether an error occurred with an errant blank slipping through quality checks, the coin was genuine. Certified and verified, it sold for $79,000 at a major coin show later that year. These finds led to a quiet but growing consensus in the numismatic community. The 1981 Roosevelt dime was not as dull as it once seemed. The rarity wasn't widespread, but that only made it more thrilling. Every new coin discovered added another layer of complexity to an otherwise forgotten issue. Collectors now scrutinized the date, torch detail, and lettering of any 1981 dime they found, hoping for the small but unmistakable signs of doubling. Despite its overlooked status, the Roosevelt dime had proved once again that value isn't always tied to precious metals or commemorative fanfare. Sometimes, it's about the unintentional. About the microscopic details. About a moment when the die shifted just enough to leave behind a story. Today, the 1981 US 1 dime coin featuring strong double die characteristics, particularly in high-grade mint state with full strike details, can fetch between $42,000 and $110,000. A coin born from a quiet mistake, overlooked for decades, has become one of the most talked about dimes of its era, not for how it was intended to be made, but for how it wasn't.